Welcome to Clotheshorse, the podcast that is, kind of excited to, barely talk about Shein this week. Barely. There'll still be Shein. Anyway, I'm your host, Amanda, and this is episode 207. This week's guest is Angela Johnson, co-founder of Fabric, a fashion incubator providing programs, classes, services, and resources to help fashion designers and entrepreneurs reach their potential. That's from their website. As I mentioned in the introduction to the first episode in the Shein series, I had the opportunity to visit Fabric in Tempe, Arizona a few months ago. And I have to say, one, I always thought it was Tempe, Arizona, so I learned something new. But two, I was super blown away by what I saw while I was there. I think personally that this episode is a nice, optimistic palate cleanser after 6 hours of conversation about Shein, because Angela and everyone else at Fabric, they are trying to create a future for fashion that is the antithesis of fast fashion. We're talking small batches, minimal waste, and just completely fueled by small businesses. As you know, I believe that small business is the future. And yes, I know that some small businesses are owned by terrible people or don't pay people well or sell bad stuff that they buy from Temu. Yes, all of that really happens. But ultimately, these bad small businesses are far outnumbered by good businesses run by good people who want a better present and future. And you know what? The odds are stacked against them because, especially in the realm of clothing and other consumer goods, the supply chain is controlled by the big corporations, meaning that small business owners have to work like 10 times harder to make things that are good. Fabric is working to change that by building a fully circular supply chain here in the United States, powered by many, many small businesses. Not only is that a win in terms of sustainability, and I mean that like in the purest way per the UN Sustainable Development Goals that we discussed last week, but this could also bring the innovation, creativity, and artistry back to fashion. This week's episode is a long one, but I'm going to tell you, I couldn't find anything I wanted to cut. So if you don't like a long episode, if it's a little too much, you could split this one over a few listening sessions. In this episode, we will be discussing Angela's experience as a designer, both at the beginning of her career and as she started her own brand. We'll get a little nostalgic with some conversation about her time working at X-Girl, an iconic 90s brand. All you 90s people got so excited right now, didn't you? For those of you who don't know what X-Girl is, it was founded by Kim Gordon of Sonic Youth and Daisy Von Firth, and it was literally the coolest brand in the 90s. And oh yeah, we're also going to talk about days of our lives just for a couple of minutes. Maybe not even a couple of minutes, a little bit of a minute. Angela will also explain how everything she learned working in the garment industry in LA, along with her loyalty to her home state of Arizona, led her to create a fashion incubator in Tempe, Arizona. Not Tempe, once again, although Tempe is delicious. I think it always wins over tofu. It's just so expensive. We'll also hear more about the vision for the Eco Park, which is a fully circular fashion manufacturing hub, and what it will take to bring that to life. And we'll round all of that out by talking about how important it is to keep up this work, even on the days when it's really hard. Before we jump into that, I just want to remind you very fast that July 15th, the day this episode is released, is the very last day to buy a ticket for the first and only Clotheshorse Jamboree. So if you're listening to this episode on the 15th, go buy your ticket now or forever hold your peace. That's all I have to say about that. So let's jump into my conversation with Angela. Angela, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
All right. Well, my name is Angela Johnson, and I'm the co-founder of Fabric. Fabric's actually a fashion incubator. It's a nonprofit. And I'm also a designer. At Fabric, we're basically helping designers by providing them with the resources that are super scarce. And those resources include things like low minimum manufacturing and the education that somebody would need to actually get into this industry and navigate the whole design, development, and manufacturing process. And like I said, I'm also a designer myself. So I have my own brand of upcycled t-shirt ball gowns.
And they're amazing. I saw one IRL when I was in Tempe recently, like
Thank
work
you.
of art. So beautiful. That's an important thing to call out too, is that Fabric is in Tempe. I got to visit you all. Like, was that in April or May? Time has gone so fast.
I know. It was in April because it was over Eco Fashion Week, which we have every April during Earth Week.
Yes. Okay, there you go. And you are in this amazing building. You're like right in the center of campus, kind of like there in Tempe. And it's just like, I don't know, there's a huge mountain basically across the street from Fabric. My friend Janelle, who joined me there, who you met, the next day after I left, she actually hiked up that mountain.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you got to do that.
Yeah.
It's called A Mountain because we're right on the footprint of the Arizona State University campus. So it's a big A for ASU, and we have like the best view of it. We're in downtown Tempe, which is amazing because if you've ever been to downtown Tempe, there's Mill Avenue, and that's where all the shops and the restaurants and bars are, and it's got a lot of traffic, a lot of college student energy, and a lot to do. So we have a really cool location, and our building is actually owned by the city of Tempe, and they let us use it. We have to give free and discounted programs and services to earn our stay in the building, but it's a beautiful building, like you said, with like, it's just like all updated and modern. We feel very privileged to be in this location in this beautiful building.
Yeah, it's super, super nice. So I'm sure that you didn't crawl out of your mother's womb, which that's a gross image right there. Sorry, I said it that way. You weren't born thinking like, oh, you know what I'm going to do someday is open a fashion incubator. But as you mentioned earlier, you are a designer. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experiences as a designer and how that led to founding Fabric?
Yeah, I would love to. And actually, instead of crawling out of my mother's womb, I actually walked straight out because I was breech. I came out feet first.
Oh, wow, you did. Good job. I'm sure that was fun for everyone.
Oh, totally. Yeah, she loves me for that. And I like literally hit the ground running, I think, because it's been the same ever since. And I'm like this A-type personality. So yeah, I'll tell you the journey and how it evolved to Fabric. And basically it started here in Arizona. I'm a fifth generation Arizonan, and I grew up with my grandparents actually taking care of me. And my mother was very young when she had me. And so I lived with my grandparents. My grandfather was U.S. District Attorney, and we were stationed in the Panama Canal Zone when I was little. And because we were, doing things that were, kind of related to politics and things like that, my grandmother was a host for a lot of different governors and princes and things like that. So she always dressed up, and she kept everything from her time from all of this. And growing up, when we moved back to Arizona, I played in her closet, and I wore all of these things all the time just for fun. And then I eventually, when I got into high school, I kind of earned my own little style there by wearing her stuff, but trying to alter it for myself. And I didn't know how to sew. She wasn't the type of grandma that was going to sit down and teach me how to sew. She was very fashion forward, but very funky at the same time. Like, her stuff is really unique. And a closet full of 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and then into the 80s dresses were really what I was exposed to. So I took those, and then I started to kind of cut them up and wear them with, Doc Martens and combat boots and things like that. And high school in the 80s, was sort of like, it was like my Pretty in Pink moment, my Molly Ringwald situation.
Okay, wait, time out. I have to ask you something, because this is something like anytime Pretty in Pink comes up that we have to discuss.
Yes.
Did you feel really sad or excited about the final prom dress?
Oh gosh. Well, it's a difficult one. I feel like part of me likes it and part of me doesn't like it. And I really just
I remember as a kid being like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And as an adult, like, I think I appreciate it more, but I'm still like, man, the one original dress was just like so stunning and like, just incredible vintage. And like, like as a lover of vintage, I just still sometimes think about it and I feel like sad for, I mean, those dresses were really torn apart in real life. You know what I mean?
You know what is so funny? It's like, that is probably what I was doing to my grandma's beautiful stuff. I'm like literally taking something that somebody now that I would look at and be like, oh my God, how could you touch that? And I'm ripping off a sleeve, and so that's the love-hate, relationship I have with Molly Ringwald's dress too. But in high school at the time, I was like, or maybe I wasn't in high school, I was in junior high. I was like, this is kind of an ugly dress. I don't know if I really appreciated it that much, but I kind of did. I thought, well, she's so cool, and it made it seem cooler than, I really might have originally liked. And then as I got older, I'm like, yeah, it's actually kind of cool. It looks a lot like the era. And, so I had an appreciation for it.
It's just like we have to talk about it, it's interesting to hear your take as a designer. So
I had no idea what it takes to actually upcycle something at that time. When I did my version of upcycling, it was, like I said, ripping off sleeves. So that was an actual upcycled project, and I now to this day appreciate what was done with it.
I think that's a really good call out, because I think most people who are not designers or do upcycling for a living or even just for fun as an art, they don't realize, like, people outside it are like, what, you like cut up some stuff and sew it back together? Like anyone could do that. And it's like, well, do you even know how to sew is question one. But two, it's actually way harder than going to like Joann and getting a fabric and cutting out the pattern and just sewing it up, right? Like I don't know, there's so much more like problem solving involved.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the extent that you're upcycling, because when I first started upcycling and I didn't have that much skill, I mean, this is a little bit beyond my grandma time, but I would basically try to utilize what was already in existence on the garment. So like if it already has a body that fits or a sleeve that I like or whatever, then I'm just going to like go over here to the side and like edit the hem and then add this little flower and things that are easy. So that was the easy way of upcycling. But the hard way of upcycling is what I do now, where it's like you're basically turning that garment back into a piece of fabric first. And then you're using that as your normal fabric to then design a dress or whatever from it. So it's much harder in that kind of upcycling. And I'd love to dive into that like a little bit, at some point as we go through this conversation. So
yeah, for sure. Because I think like when we talk about like upcycling specifically, I think it has, I don't know if you see this playing out on social media, but there's a lot of discourse that's sort of anti secondhand resale, right? And like really just a lot of vitriol targeting people who are resellers. And I think that upcyclers have been tossed into that bucket now too. And I have recently seen some just like really wild, just like battles on social media, kind of people coming out to yell at others for upcycling things.
Well, don't we have enough clothing on this planet right now to continue to upcycle?
Yeah, I've heard the rumors, like 6 generations? I know, but yet we're like over here fighting about this. I'm like, here's my thought on that, is I think sometimes you're just like, I'm so frustrated by the world as a whole that like, I need to lash out at something that feels like, I don't know, within my realm that like I might have an impact on someone or something. And here's something that maybe I can control. So I'm going to jump in here and yell at someone for like selling stuff they got at the Goodwill. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a lot more complicated than that too. But it is just interesting that like because people send me these posts when they see them, and the just comment sections where people are just tearing apart whoever posted their upcycling project, and kind of like, no one else was going to wear that.
Right.
There was one where someone had like upcycled a wedding dress that like, I'm going to tell you right now, no one's going to buy that from the thrift store. It was like not a good wedding dress. Oh, so good to that for them, because I bet that was a really hard project. I mean, they really took it apart and put it back together again, like you were saying.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think sometimes people just need something to feel like they have some sort of authority, and that allows them to actually
Yeah.
do that. So I'm sure. I mean, that you could
Yeah.
say that about every part of the internet, not just fashion.
Yeah, the internet, in summary, it's very, very true. So anyway, you are lucky because as you were tearing apart your grandma's clothes, the internet didn't exist really in the same way.
So there's no documentation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, listen, I say this to Justin all the time. I'm like, I'm so grateful the internet didn't exist when I was like 18 because
for sure.
sometimes I can't even handle being reminded of by Facebook of something I posted when I was like 30. Like, I'm like embarrassed.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I have a teenager and I have a 25-year-old, and I'm like, thank goodness. I see what they go through. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that my life was not captured eternally when I was making bad decisions. So
yeah, seriously. Okay, so you were upcycling stuff of your grandma's. Like, what happens next?
Okay, so I'm doing that, and then I end up I graduated from high school, and I was not a good student in high school. Let's just put it out there. I was terrible. I had like a 1.9 GPA, and it was because I was doing bad things in high school.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I think we can all agree it was pretty bad.
It was terrible. It was like, I really did not like school, and I was just having fun. And so when it came time to figure out what I want to do with my life, I ended up, going, okay, I need to figure something out. I ended up going and majoring in speech communication at Northern Arizona University because it involved no math. That was my reason for my choosing my major. So I'm like, and unlike you, who is like a math whiz, I can't do it. So I was like, what major can I do that has no math? And I also had this like feeling that this would be a good skill to have, to be able to speak in front of people. And I also felt comfortable doing it, whereas most people say it's like the thing they fear more than death. So I'm like, well, I don't think it's that scary. I think it's a little scary, and I'd like to make it less scary for myself. So that's my decision. And I go and I major in speech communication, and I get about to graduate. And at this point I've got all A's. I'm like I got the Mortarboard Society, honorary, award. I'm like doing great. I have a much better GPA, but I think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this degree? I really don't know, because I can speak in front of people, but I have nothing to say. I'm not an expert in anything. I didn't pay attention in school, so it's not like I'm smart. I really don't know what to say. So I basically said, okay, I have to rethink my life at this point, and I want to become an expert in something. And I took one of those career quizzes, and it said, hey, you should look at fashion, and everything pointed to fashion. And so I was like, I never thought about fashion, only because this is the 80s, or now it's the 90s. At this point, it would be the early 90s. And there wasn't really a career besides being a designer for a brand. Like, it wasn't like if you went to fashion school, suddenly you were going to be the next Yves Saint Laurent or something. Like, you would probably be working for some brand. And that's not really what I wanted to do. What I really wanted to do was design clothing for women snowboarders, because when I was at NAU, it snows there. In fact, a lot of people don't know this, but it gets a lot of snow. We're in Arizona here, and 2 hours from Phoenix is actually one of the best ski resorts, and tons of snow. So I had worked at the ski resort during college to pay for my college, and then I actually got really good at snowboarding, and I was one of the only women on the mountain. There weren't very many, because this is still very early 90s, and I was always wearing my boyfriend's clothes. And so, to go snowboarding. And I even went to the thrift stores and found, at one point I was wearing fireman pants because they were waterproof. And so I was like, okay, I'd like to create a women's brand of snowboarding clothes, and also like surf and skate clothes, because I had always been into skateboarding culture. And so, and my boyfriend was a skater, and things like that. So I thought, that's what I want to do. So I ended up investigating and finding the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles. And I took a big leap of faith, and I just went, and I applied there. I got accepted, and I moved to Los Angeles. I knew nobody, and I left my whole life behind. And I said, I need a place to live. I had a different set of grandparents, my father's side, that lived out there. And so I said, can I move in with you? I need to go to fashion school. And he's like, yeah, sure. And so I ended up living in Agora Hills. And if you know anything about LA, Agora Hills is about an hour and a half drive on a normal day with LA traffic to get down to downtown LA.
Wow. Wow.
So little did I know that I was setting myself up for 3 hours in the car every day to go to school, but it saved me from having to pay for a dorm or something like that, or rent an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to FIDM, FIDM, and I majored in fashion design. And then when I was about to graduate, I started to look at different jobs, and I really wanted to work for a specific brand that I had been seeing on MTV. And during that time, I mean, MTV was actual music videos, but every once in a while there was
R.I.P.
I know, it's so sad. But every once in a while there was like something that they would plug in. And one time I was watching, and there was this runway show from a brand called X Girl. And X Girl was owned by Kim Gordon of Sonic Youth. And I was a Sonic Youth fan. And I watched this fashion show, and it was very like an anti-fashion show. They just popped up on the streets of New York. And back then this was unheard of. And they just like had this random fashion show open to the public kind of thing. And it was very raw. And I was like, this is so my jam. I love these clothes. I love this whole concept. And I want to work for these people. So I went into the Career Center and I said, I want to work for X Girl. And they were like, who? And it's because they were sort of underground. It was a medium, small size brand located in LA. And they did some research. They looked in the phone book, found them, and ended up, there was no way they were doing a Google search back then. And they found them and they called them up and they said, hey, we have somebody who's interested in working for you. And they happen to be hiring. So I got my foot in the door.
Wow.
And I was, so basically I brought my whole portfolio and I go to show everybody my portfolio and they're like, we don't need to see that. You went to FIDM, we're hiring you, which is awesome. Because I was like, wow, that
wow.
paid off,
Yeah, like instantly.
I know, which was great, which says a lot. I mean, that school was really good at training people on skills that they need to actually get jobs. So I got my foot in the door as a cutter. And the cutter is the person that sits there all day and actually like takes the patterns and cuts out the fabric to sew up the one sample so that the sample maker can sew it up and then you can do a fitting. Then I would be in there with the fittings, and if there was a pattern change, sometimes I'd be able to make the pattern edit, and then I would recut it, and then I'd have to recut the pattern out of paper because back then we didn't do digital patterns. Everything was by hand. So I would recut the paper pattern, and then I would trace it again out of the fabric and then recut it, and then they would sew it, and I would keep doing that. And I sat in this warehouse all day, every day, just cutting. And then if I had to cut multiple samples, I would layer a bunch of layers on top of each other and try to get through them with scissors because nobody in this business, in this company, knew that there was a thing called a chickadee, which is a rotary cutter that is electric.
Okay, wait. It just occurred to me that you were cutting all this with scissors, which must have been so hard.
Yes. Basically, I sat there and cut all day, and eventually my muscles in my neck ended up pulling on my muscles in my jaw, and my jaw got locked. I ended up getting really, really severe TMJ, and that I couldn't open my mouth for like a year. I went through all kinds of physical therapy and everything you can imagine, from acupuncture to chiropractic, and then ended up with surgeries to actually unlock my jaw. And then I had to wear braces. So that's a whole nother side story. But it was because I'm like sitting there cutting all day. But I don't want to downplay or disappoint, myself and everybody about that experience, because it was a good experience to actually give me the knowledge, the hands-on knowledge of what I had learned in school, and dealing with patterns and the reality of like what happens and everything was really helpful. It was also really fun because this brand X Girl was also their partner business was called X Large, and it was owned by Mike Diamond of the Beastie Boys. And so both of these, and that was one of my other favorite bands. And so I was working for like two of my favorite bands, and I was meeting all kinds of fun celebrities. They would come into the warehouse. There was a skate ramp in there. There was a basketball court. This was before the whole business we're changing like Google and trying to, make it more friendly for, the rest of us. And so it was already like that. And we just had so much fun, and I met so many fun people. And I mean, tried my best to not be starstruck, by all these people, and just had, it was really, really, really cool. And then I ended up moving up from from cutter to assistant designer.
Oh, wow.
And that was pretty easy because, when your foot is in the door someplace, it's just great to be able to hire within, somebody already knows the business and everything. So that was helpful. And then I got to do some design for the brands, and then and be a designer. And so I was kind of living my dream, but still hadn't started my own line. And then I got to be the production manager, and the production manager left, and I had been working under her for so long that I knew her job. And so I took her position. And the production manager in a small to medium-sized business is really responsible for taking the idea and getting it made. So you're doing a lot. At a big business, somebody is doing each job, like sourcing or, quality control or hiring the cutting and sewing factory. I was doing all of that. So I'm basically like the person who moves the product through the entire process and writes down, fills out all the forms for all the contractors and quality controls and checks that they did it correctly, and then keeps it moving along and getting it actually made in production in small batches. And the key here, because this is going to lead somewhere, let me promise you, the key here is small batches, because we made everything in Los Angeles. And normally when you manufacture, you're usually using overseas factories because that's how the industry has been doing it for all these years.
A long time.
And that's why it's broken, and why you have this podcast is because it's, it's unsustainable and it's not working. But if you want to make some small batches, you have to be very hands-on, and you have to basically be a production manager and have those skills. And then what you do is you contract out different people in Los Angeles, let's say, to do pattern making, and then somebody else to grade the pattern, which is size the pattern, somebody else to cut, somebody else to sew, and then you run around and you pick up your materials and you drop them off and you orchestrate the whole thing. So I got experience doing that. That was the best education I have ever had. It was great that I went to school, but the fact that I was hands-on as a production manager is really what set me up to create fabric today. And I'll tell you why. That experience right there, I used to be able to start my own brand. So after I had all those connections and I was like, okay, I get it. I know how to do this. I can't imagine having to make 5,000 units of something and meet a minimum overseas. I want to make 50 or 100 or whatever. So I'm going to utilize this way of doing it. And I ended up partnering with an actress on Days of Our Lives. We got connected by my boyfriend, who's now my husband, but he was my boyfriend at the time. He was working at a ski shop, and his friend that he was working with had his girlfriend was Christy Clark. She played Carrie Brady on Days of Our Lives for like 12 years.
Oh my gosh. I mean, okay, I know exactly who you're talking about because I grew up, like whenever I was not in school, I would watch Days of Our Lives with my grandma every day.
Oh my God.
My grandma worked from home because she had her own business. And at 1:00 Eastern time, when Days of Our Lives was on, it was lunchtime. And she would come into the living room and we would watch it together. And I was watching it when I was way too young to understand what was happening for sure. And I would act things out with my Barbies that I'd learned from Days of Our Lives. But I even in college, whenever I could, there were a few people in my dorm who also had this similar fixation with Days of Our Lives, and so they would record it on a VHS tape and we would watch it together. I mean, I I haven't seen Days of Our Lives in a long time, but I want to say like 10 years ago, I was like at a trade show and I was like, went back to my room in the middle of the day to do some work. And I just like put on the TV for noise and Days of Our Lives was on. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll watch this. And I am not kidding you, Angela. The same plot lines are going on. It's great.
It is.
It's like,
crazy.
I'm like, seriously, those two, they're still not together? Like, what? I mean, it's been like 20 years now, guys. Come on.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, my God.
And it was like all the same characters were on there. You know, like Marlena is still on there and all this stuff. So anyway, I between like X-Girl and Days of Our Lives, you were just like bringing up so much nostalgia for me. Even just like X-Girl to me as a teenager was the coolest brand ever.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you don't have anything bad to say about it.
No.
And I had this X-Girl t-shirt that I just save up money to buy because it wasn't cheap, right? And I was like a broke teenager. And I had had a submarine on it. And I wore that t-shirt like until it was just dust.
I know exactly what shirt you're talking about. That was when I was there. Yes. Oh my God.
I felt so cool that I had that shirt.
Oh my gosh.
I felt so cool.
My little sister, she's 8 years younger than me. So she took all the X-Girls samples back to Phoenix and wore them. And everyone was just like, what is this? You know, so she kind of set the scene in Arizona for the whole X-Girl vibe that was going on here. And yeah, it was like this cool underground kind of, you know, you kind of had to know this brand. You know, and it had such a cool vibe to it. And it was a great experience. I have nothing bad to say about it because they were doing exactly what you need to do when you are trying to be sustainable and you're trying to be responsible and ethical by manufacturing in the United States in enough batches where you don't end up with excess inventory, which is like the theme of my life. And so basically they were the people that taught me that, you know, so I go back to that as like one of the best memories is just, you know, having that experience. And then the X Large brand was really cool too, because it's the same thing. They're under the same umbrella. And so the whole concept and working for them taught me so much too, because the vibe and the aesthetic and everything, they were very into this very 1960s bachelor lounge kind of
oh my
graphics,
gosh,
you know, and things like that.
That was so that time for sure. And in college I worked at Urban Outfitters like as a sales associate in New York, and like that's what our men's department was like it was so that like 60s bachelor like cardigans and like color blocked and like velour and things like that. So it definitely really, really takes me back. You know that like those two brands are now owned by a Japanese company.
Well, it was the Japanese distributor that we used to distribute to that eventually bought
way.
It. Yeah.
Because I've gone to their store in Harajuku and I have totally bought a t-shirt there.
Oh my God, that's really awesome.
Cool. I still felt as cool as it made me feel when I bought that when I was like 16. You know, like it was just like, oh my God, it's still powerful to me.
Well, I held on to so much of that stuff. And so I passed it down to my children, and my husband and I still wear all of these pieces, and we still feel cool and all of this stuff because I knew that this was like special stuff. So, So basically I love the fact that you know who Christy is and that you watch Days of Our Lives, because that was also another very special time and led to what I do today. I know this is a long story. I hope this is okay, but
no, it's a fascinating story.
Okay. I just feel like it's important information to kind of hear how.
I think it is.
Why and everything. So basically, Christy became my business partner, and we started a brand called Monkey Wench. And not wrench, but wench, because this is like the early 90s when you have that whole like, you know, girl power. We're going to have a tongue-in-cheek play on everything, you know, and that kind of thing. So basically it was Monkey Wench, and we're a bunch of wenches.
Right.
And so we designed the brand to be very similar to like the Roxy Quicksilver vibe, because that was kind of happening at that time too. So it was snow skate surf apparel for men and women, very small brand. And we tried to make snowboarding clothes and some board shorts and bathing suits and things like that. And we started out, it was Christy as the investor, me as the production
Okay.
manager and designer, and a partner that was named Dana, who I went to fashion school with, who was our graphic designer and branding person. So the three of us had a different role. We each owned the partnership equally, three ways, and contributed equally. And then we started basically designing and making these things. And fortunately, because of Christy, we had enough money to really, go about the process in a way that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, normally when people start clothing brands, they either are sewing stuff from home, and then they're trying to figure out how to turn it into something that can be manufactured. And it's really hard to do that, because if you're not designing
Yeah.
from the beginning, then it's, to be manufactured, then it's really hard to reverse engineer and go back and start over. And so we were able to kind of start from the beginning to make stuff that can be manufactured. And then because of the connections that I had made at X Large and X Girl to the factories and the contractors, we were able to skirt under the minimums. Most of those factories, even though they're in LA, they do have minimums still. It's just not like 5,000 units. It's more like 500 units at some of those places. And for the sewing factories. And I knew that we weren't going to be able to meet minimums because we just started and we didn't need 500 units. So what I did was I would still go and have my pattern made, and then have my sample sewn and do a fitting and create, the design, and repeat until we had a perfect fitting garment and a tech pack, which is all the instructions that go along with that garment, and a production ready pattern. And then I would, you know, after we got orders and went to trade shows and things like that, then I would know how many to order. And then if I only needed 100 or 50 or whatever, then what I would do is I would take my patterns to a grader. They would size them for me. Then I would ask them to make a marker, which is the template of all of your sized patterns kind of squeezed together like Tetris so that you can save fabric. And that gets placed on top of all of your layers of fabric, and then it's cut through all at once. And so your marker has to be perfect. So that was a skill I learned at X Large, and I ended up, being able to fill out the forms that they requested and check that they did it correctly. Then I would pick up the marker and I would drive over to the cutting service, and I would drop off all my fabrics and my markers, and I'd fill out a cutting ticket. They would cut everything. Then I would go back and I would check it all and make sure it was there, it was all correct, and it wasn't missing anything, and it was all cut in the right direction. Then I would pick it all up, put it in my car, and I would drive over to the sewing factories. And each sewing factory does something different. So one sewing factory might make jeans, and another one might make bathing suits or whatever, and they can't make each other's stuff. Like, they have the equipment and the skill and the know-how to make the one thing that they make. So I'd be going to different factories, and I would go into these factories with the cuts. That's the important thing, because now they don't have to do anything. They don't do any design development. They don't have to grade it, make a marker. They don't have to cut it. All they have to do is sew it. So they would say, all right, all we have to do is sew it, we'll lower the minimums. And then I would say, well, what if I am patient and I just wait until you have a break in between your bigger jobs? And then if we do that, can you sew 50 pieces for me instead of 300? And they would say, sure. Because what happens is those factories, they get a big order. And then when the order's done, if they don't have another one lined up and in the queue and ready to go with all the fabrics and trims sitting there, they have to actually lay everybody off until they get another big order. So all the sewers get laid off like consistently, and then they get brought back on. And it's only because there's not enough money in sewing to have them sit in front of a sewing machine and twiddle their thumbs, so they have to have some work in there. And so it's this, unfortunate situation. And so what I would do is come in and wait a month. And then when they were done sewing for some big brand, they would put my stuff on the sewing machine for 50 pieces or 100 pieces or some unheard of small quantity, because it kept a couple of their sewers employed for a couple more a week or two, And so that was great, except if they got another big order, my stuff would literally get ripped off the sewing machine and thrown onto the floor because they need to work on this big order. And then they would finish that big order, and then they would go back to my stuff. So my stuff was late all the time, but I was only selling, I was only selling to boutiques that had, a human that I could talk to explain things, and then they would get it and they would be okay most of the time. Sometimes my orders got canceled, but most of the time they didn't, because I could talk through it with them. And that was the secret sauce. That's what it took to actually make small batches domestically in the United States. So I learned something that not a lot of people learn. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to grow this business this way. And I did. And it ended up that we went from 100 pieces to 150, 200, 300. It was growing. 4 years in, we were selling in Japan and England and all over the United States. And we were finally starting to become profitable. It was just breaking even and just tipping the point of where we could actually pull profits out. And that's pretty rare for any business. It takes 3 to 5 years to become profitable. And when you're in fashion, it's way harder. So it takes longer. And we were doing it. So I felt really proud. And then my grandmother passed away. And she's the one that took care of me. I mean, so was my grandfather. And I moved back to Arizona to take care of my grandfather because I felt, that was a responsibility since they raised me. And when I did that, I realized I could no longer manufacture clothing in LA from Arizona because there's no way I'm driving to downtown LA every day. And I was literally in downtown LA every day. And so I shut down a profitable business that I shut down my dream because of the lack of resources in Arizona. And this was 2001. So in 2001, I changed everything, just completely pivoted. And I said, all right, I know the secret sauce. Why don't I start consulting and teaching people what it would take to make small batches domestically in the US? That is sustainable. That's much more financially viable. It's more ethical. And I feel good about that. So I started consulting and teaching all these people how to do that, and then kind of watching them fail because there were no resources for them in Arizona. And unless they believed me and they moved to LA, then they really didn't have any place to walk into and to pick up their cuts and drop them off here and check that everything was done correctly, because checking quality control is the number one thing that they need to do. And they can't do that, especially at this time when there's no video chatting. And so you did literally have to be there. And that was what inspired me to create the resources at first in Arizona, just to help all the people in Arizona do that. And I was also trying to also survive. I mean, just being a consultant in the beginning wasn't making me enough money. So I took a job at a bunch of different schools. I've taught at Arizona State University and Mesa Community College and Collins College and Art Institute of Phoenix and New School for the Arts. And I've taught every fashion class you can imagine. And that was paying my bills as well. But I was watching all kinds of students graduate and move away because there were no resources or jobs in Arizona. So that made me feel guilty. So I was consulting a bunch of people and teaching a bunch of people, but then they couldn't survive in Arizona doing what I was teaching them. And it felt really yucky. I was also trying to build a community in Arizona because I thought that, by bringing together everybody and if people could see how many people wanted resources, maybe somebody would create a factory here. So I was pulling together all the designers and students, and we were doing fashion shows at all the museums and galleries and restaurants and festivals and things like that. And I would pull in all these different designers, and we would showcase all these things that we've made in our homes, like hobbyists and stuff like that. And then eventually it started to pick up and grow, and more people thought, wow, there's like something going on here in Arizona. And then we had a Phoenix Fashion Week, a Scottsdale Fashion Week, a Tucson Fashion Week. We had a whole bunch of fashion weeks starting up, but I felt even more guilty because now people were paying money to be on a runway for 5 minutes of fame. And if they happen to get an order from that runway, which that's hard to do in Arizona, then how are they going to even fill that order? So then I started to feel like I created a monster, and that was like weighing on me. And all the stuff I was putting on those runways was the stuff I was making at home, which was the thing you asked me about before, my t-shirt ball gowns. And so I would go to the thrift stores and I would grab a whole bunch of t-shirts and I would create these ball gowns just so that I could stay creative and make something and be sustainable. And so that's something I could do on my own without manufacturing. So that started to become something I was getting known for. And that started to bring me some money. I was actually like making a pretty good living off of it after, years. And so between all this consulting, teaching, and making my own ball gowns, and then being disappointed that there was no resource, that was the reason that, long story short, long answer to your quick question was what led you to create fabric. But that's the journey.
I mean, you touched on so many things that are, I mean, this is still the reality, right? Like a lot of my clients are small brands here in the United States who do domestic manufacturing. And almost all of them are based in like San Francisco or LA, a couple in New York. And their lives are seriously driving around things from facility to facility, like everything you described. I was just like, this is the reality of what it is to make clothing,
Yeah.
especially if you care about, doing it ethically, doing it as sustainably as possible. What I have found is that a lot of people who are making clothing sustainably here in the United States are in fact doing it in a way that is unsustainable for themselves as individuals, meaning like their time,
Yeah.
their energy, their like capacity, right? And so they're spending so much time being production managers and at the same time also trying to run a business. And a lot of this is not just their desire to be sustainable and ethical and create the best product. It's also because of the issue of the minimums.
Yeah. It's out of necessity. Like you don't have another choice.
It's out of necessity. Yeah, exactly. Because I would say if you are kind of lucky, you can find a factory more easily that will maybe, in LA specifically, I would say, will do a run of 300 for you. And 300 units is a lot for a small business. That is so much stuff.
Yeah.
I would bet you it would be easily on the low end, that would be $15,000 in cost that you would have to pay the factory. And that's not including fabric and everything else. And I think that people who work outside of this world don't realize how hard it is.
Yeah. I mean, think about the investment if you have a whole collection. That's one piece. So if you have, let's say, 8 pieces in your collection and you need $15,000 to manufacture it, and you also probably needed about $4,000 or $3,000 just to get through developing that product for each of those designs, you're now looking at $20,000 times 8 pieces just to make one season's, production run. That's what a lot of people don't understand when they start, when they get into this business or when they're not in the business,
Right. What I'm seeing is a lot of small businesses who are running their business off of credit cards, for one, to pay for all that production, or like now Shopify loans. That's like where a lot of people get financing now. And on top of that, they are just running themselves into the ground, driving stuff around and like basically like doing everything they can to make this fit together. Like I think, and I know this because, I have in the past thought about, and I'm not interested in this at all at this point, but like, I would love to start my own brand. For a long time, I really wanted to make like really cool, like plus size clothing that would be sort of taking like that when Urban Outfitters was still cool, that aesthetic, but applying it to plus sizes because no one still does that. And, the reality is that like, where are you going to get that money? And are you ready to work all day, every day, 365 days a year, right? Because even then at that point, I knew that part of it. And I was just like, I'm not. Like people who are saying like, I am a designer and I have this vision and I'm going to bring it to the world, they are really putting themselves out there and they are working really, really hard. It's no joke. Like no one should ever troll any designer, especially a small brand, on social media for like their prices or anything like that. Because trust me, they're trying their hardest.
Oh my gosh, you said it. It's so true. It's really hard. There's so many obstacles in your way when you're just a small brand, and so. Yeah, give them a break. Support them. It's worth the money. And think about what you're spending it on. It's a person, it's somebody who's like trying to do it ethically and sustainably and domestically. All those things are good. So it's kind of the disposable overseas overproduction model, which it deserves something. And when you have all those costs, if you're developing something, let's say you're developing a dress and it takes, you have to pay pattern makers and sample sewers and you have to go through revisions and revisions and revisions. And ultimately it costs you thousands of dollars to get something ready to manufacture. So if it was, let's just say $3,000 to get something ready to manufacture so that you have production ready patterns, tech packs, and a sew by sample made out of your actual production fabric, because that means you're ready to manufacture, then you take that cost and you split it between how many you're actually going to manufacture, because you have to recoup those costs. So if you're only going to be making 100, then that $3,000 needs to be split between 100 units. So you're adding that cost to each unit. Or if it's between 300, then it's going to be less. But if it's between 3,000, then it's just a penny, it's pennies each. So it's really like scale is the thing that dictates price. Quantity dictates price. I can't say it enough. The less you make, the more it actually costs. And so that's what consumers need to understand, because, we're all used to clothing being so cheap because, like you've said, over and over, we've been trained to think that way. And now, like it's broken because now everybody has no value they don't think that clothing is valuable. They don't understand what it actually takes to make it. And that's why the whole system is kind of broken.
Yeah, it really, really is. And as we were talking about samples just now, it reminded me that in a lot of my jobs where, ultimately as the buyer for the retailer, in terms of like the power dynamic between myself and the brand I might be buying wholesale from, the power balance was always in my favor, right?
Yeah.
So like, because I was going to place the order, I was like writing the check, so to speak. And in most cases, if we bought something from even the smallest brand, they were required to give us samples for free.
Oh my goodness.
And I know. And that's just like one more way that it is really hard, because yes, you might start a brand and sell directly to consumers, like maybe in your own boutique or your own website, and you'll grow from there and you'll never need to sell wholesale. But for many brands, really the path to scalability and, overcoming the minimums issue, right? And the pricing issue is to start selling wholesale.
Yes.
Because then someone's going to come and buy 12 or 200 or 2,000 from you.
Yep.
Rather than one customer buying one, right? So it's a path. It actually, it's like, it's something I work on with my clients, because it's the path to them being able to like not work all the time, basically someday. It hasn't happened yet, but in theory. And so here you are as a small brand, and like say Anthropology is like, hey, we want to buy this dress from you. We're going to need 2 samples for free. Like that's a cost that you have to bear. And then on top of that, like any big retailer especially is going to squeeze you on pricing so hard that you will be lucky if you break even on that order.
You know what that says is that even the industry doesn't understand itself. Because, like the big brand like that, they get those free samples from overseas giant factories with giant minimums, because that factory will get an order for a giant quantity. And so they can, not technically, but theoretically, they could make back their money by cushioning in a couple of pennies onto each one if it was a 100,000 piece order, or a dollar onto each one if it was a 500 piece order, or whatever. That's where they recoup their money. The amount of time it takes to actually make product, to develop the product and make samples, they can recoup that in quantity that you're going to order later. Whereas a small brand is never going to make that quantity. And so it's money out of their pocket to actually get to the point where there's a sample. And it's like, they're never going to recoup that cost, especially if they're only ever going to make 100 or 500 or something like that. It's going to be impossible to recoup that money. And if you're giving the samples away, that's crazy. It's like it's like asking an artist to paint a piece of, a work of art on a canvas, and now do it 3 or 4 more times for free for somebody so that they have it in their hands to see if they like it. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And I think you'd hit the nail on the head that like this industry doesn't understand how this industry works, because, starting my career working for a big company, I definitely had a view of how the industry worked that turned out to not be accurate. And so basically after I left Urban Outfitters, every job I had after that was with a smaller company. And so suddenly that power that I had gotten accustomed to having, it was shrinking with each job. And then suddenly I'm like at a startup and people are like, well, you're also going to have to pay for the samples. And I'm like, wait, what? Don't you know who I am? But like, then I was like, oh, wait, that's right. The samples get made in the sample room. They're not part of the production in the first place. And they cost more to be made than even like just the regular unit from the total production run.
Like
right?
a lot more.
It's a one-off, especially if you're like, I want this exclusive print.
Yeah.
Because they're going to like digitally print enough fabric to make you one sample.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's like this industry does not know how it works is a true story. And I feel like for many of us, how we have learned how it truly works is by working for a small business where you get to see the reality of it.
Yes.
And how hard it is. Because I felt like early in my career, if I just had an idea, I could get it made. It was that easy because everybody would be like, please give us the order. We know you're going to order like 10,000 units. Like, we'll take it, right? And as companies I worked for got smaller and smaller, suddenly it was like, you can't have whatever you imagine. You can't get special custom buttons or all these other ideas that you have because you don't have the buying power. And I'm not a designer, right? So it was frustrating to me as a buyer, right? Because I would be like, I have this vision. Now I can't have what I want. But imagine being a designer. You are an artist and you can't get the materials that you need to fully see through your vision simply because you're not like big and powerful enough.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is, when you're sewing one or you're making one, there's humans that have to sit there and physically cut out the fabric and then thread a sewing machine, thread probably 3 or 4 sewing machines because each one does something different, just to thread a cover stitch machine. A cover stitch is the hem of a t-shirt. It's that double row that you see at the bottom of your t-shirt that allows the hem to stretch. It takes a good half hour to thread that machine so that it can actually do the sewing. It takes 10 seconds to actually sew that hem. So if you're going to make a t-shirt as an example, as a sample, then you're going to spend half hour threading that machine, a half hour threading the overlock machine, a half hour, threading this, single needle that's going to have an attachment to actually put the neckline in and the binding and all of that stuff. And so setting up the equipment might take you hours. And then to sew the t-shirt might take you, another hour or a half hour or something like that. But it's like just the time it took to get it ready. And then when you sew at scale, everything's already set up and you're just shoving the pieces through. So if that cover stitch machine is already set up, you can shove like 1,000 hems into it in a couple days. That makes a lot more sense. So most people don't understand the difference between samples or one-offs as opposed to like production.
Let's take a moment to thank some of the incredible small businesses who keep Clotheshorse going via their generous Patreon support. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycled clothing using only reclaimed vintage or thrifted materials from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Shift Clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room. All while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Catch us at flea markets around Southern California by following us on Instagram at vino.vintage so you don't miss our next event. Dylan Page is an online clothing and lifestyle brand based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our products are chosen with intention for the conscious community. Everything we carry is animal-friendly, ethically made, sustainably sourced, and cruelty-free. Dylan Page is for those who never stop questioning where something comes from. We know that personal experience dictates what's sustainable for you, and we are here to help guide and support you to make choices that fit your needs. Check us out at dylanpage.com and find us on Instagram at dylanpagelifeandstyle. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Find us on Instagram at Salt Hats. Gentle Vibes Vintage. We are purveyors of polyester and psychedelic relics. We encourage experimentation and play not only in your wardrobe, but in your home too. We have thousands of killer vintage pieces ready for their next adventure. See them all on Instagram at Gentle Vibes Vintage. Thumbprint is Detroit's only fair trade marketplace located in the historic Eastern Market. Our small business specializes in products handmade by empowered women in South Africa, making a living wage, creating things they love like hand-painted candles and ceramics. We also carry a curated assortment of sustainable and natural locally made goods. Thumbprint is a great gift destination for both the special people in your life and for yourself. Browse our online store at thumbprintdetroit.com and find us on Instagram at thumbprintdetroit. Vagabond Vintage DTLV is a vintage clothing, accessories, and decor reselling business based in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. Not only do we sell in Las Vegas, but we're also located throughout resale markets in San Francisco, as well as at a curated boutique called Lux and Ivy, located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jessica, the founder and owner of Vagabond Vintage DTLV, recently opened the first IRL location located in the Arts District of downtown Las Vegas on August 5th. The shop has a strong emphasis on 60s and 70s garments, single-stitch tees, and dreamy loungewear. Follow them on Instagram at Vagabond Vintage DTLV and keep an eye out for their website coming fall of 2022. Basically, like as a small brand, as an emerging designer, you come up with against a few obstacles.
Yeah.
I'm just summarizing this for everybody who's listening. One is this issue of minimums and finding a factory that will make things in small quantities for you that are also like affordable for you. And two is just generally things like this burden of like samples and other trims and whatnot. They're really expensive, and sometimes like things are just out of reach completely. So what do you do at Fabric that helps people get around that?
That is a great question.
Or make it happen? Because this is why you started Fabric.
It's exactly why we started Fabric. So knowing the secret sauce that I explained that it took for me to start my brand, I took that. And all those years I've been using these contracts like cutting tickets and grading and marking tickets and sewing contracts and keeping organized with a fabric worksheet and a trim worksheet and send out sheet and all these different contracts and documents to kind of like keep everything going. And I took all of that and I kind of re-engineered them. I made them mine. And then I was using those to help people when I was consulting and teaching them production management. And then I put all of it together in sort of like a roadmap, which is a guide that takes somebody through all of those steps with all of those documents. And it teaches them how to actually be their own production manager so they don't end up having to hire a full-time $80,000 a year employee that knows what they're doing, because they probably don't even know that they need that, and they probably can't afford it even if they knew that they need that, and or majoring in apparel production management in school or something so that you know what you're doing.
Right.
So that roadmap is our biggest thing that we offer at Fabric. It's basically teaching somebody to be that production manager, that quality control manager. It's also teaching them the foundational things that they have to understand, like you kind of have to understand a little bit about textiles. If you're going to be designing clothing, you have to understand foundational things like the difference between knits and wovens and fiber content versus the way that the yarn is knitted or woven, because there's different construction elements in a garment if you're making it out of a knit or a woven. So how do you design something if you don't even know that? And then there's like, how do you spec? Spec is measuring. You have to be able to measure because you have to be able to tell people what you want, and then you have to be able to check that they did it after they did it. So these core things are also built into the roadmap. And then the roadmap has the whole like roadmap towards starting a business. Like, how do you get financing? How do you write a business plan? How do you, just get all the licenses that you need? It's also got a whole roadmap on branding and marketing and events and trade shows and things like that. So the core of it, though, is that production management. So that's our biggest give back. But the other thing that we do at Fabric is offer that opportunity for somebody to not have to meet those minimums. And so we do no minimum manufacturing of almost any product. So we have to be really special over here. We have to have lots of different equipment, which most factories don't because they specialize in one thing. So they have the machines that it takes to do the one thing. We have to have machines to do everything. We also have to have the skill to do everything and know how to handle all those different materials, lightweights, heavyweights, knits, wovens. We have to be able to understand construction on different garments, tops, bottoms, dresses, men's, women's, children's, pets, whatever, you name it, medical devices, like people come in here with some pretty cool things. And so all of that is just this weird formula that you don't normally find out there for a reason, because factories can't make any money offering no minimums and doing everything. So that's the other thing that is the model of fabric. Teach somebody to be a production manager and then offer them the opportunity to make small batches. And then the final thing that is so special about this place is that now, instead of doing it the old-fashioned way, add in all the technology that can make it a lot more streamlined, a lot more efficient, a lot more affordable, and a lot more sustainable. And so the industry has been stuck on this like old school analog way of doing things forever. I mean, like you've mentioned on your podcast multiple times, people think that like some machine, like a robot or something, spits out clothing. I mean,
seriously,
I'm guilty. When I was at school at NAU and, didn't know anything about clothing, I thought the same thing. I was like, I'm just going to go to design school and come up with imaginary things. And this Dr. Seuss robot is going to like, and then out is going to come my completed garment, right? But that isn't really the reality. So, So basically that old analog way is what the big brands are using. They still are using it because they have a hard time changing things. When you're a huge company, any kind of change takes forever, and embracing technology is one of those things that everybody's having a hard time doing. Well, at Fabric, we embrace every bit of technology that exists so that a lot of this stuff is so much better. And I'm going to explain those things so that it makes more sense, if that's okay. Can I kind of lead you through that?
Okay. Come on. Tell us all about it.
This is the most important part. So basically, imagine that process I was talking about where I used to sit in that warehouse and I used to cut out the samples and then we'd sew it up and then we'd make an adjustment to the pattern and then we'd sew up another one and we'd make another adjustment. Sometimes we had to go through 5 samples. So we had one jean at X-Girl that we did 10 times till we finally got it right. And so that's a lot of money and a lot of waste. Imagine all the fabric that gets, all the paper patterns that go to waste, all the fabric that goes to waste, and all the sewing that goes to waste and everything, and expense. Like every time you hire a pattern maker, my pattern maker in Los Angeles in the 90s used to charge us $300 an hour. So you can imagine, a pattern that took 5 hours to make would be $1,500. And then as we make changes, she's charging us by the hour. And I mean, that's where the money goes into sample making. And then sewing, an average thing might cost a couple $100s to sew it up just to get the sample right. So what we do is instead of going through all that hands-on stuff, we use all of the most updated CAD software so that we can virtually design patterns. We can virtually stitch them up on avatars. And then we have the properties of the fabrics built in so that you can see how it's going to drape or stretch or fit. And then we make adjustments to the patterns right there on your avatar with your new fabric if you choose or whatever until we get it right. And now you've saved yourself multiple samples. Then we do need to cut and sew one in real life because you really do have to test it at one point. But it's like final, that final version is usually it. So you've got one sample instead of like 5 or 10. Then the beauty of this is you can take that avatar in that garment, that 3D garment, and you can actually play around with colors and prints. So instead of going and sourcing all the different colors that you want, because you have to meet minimums on the fabrics too. So instead of going and like finding the fabric and getting it in green and blue and yellow and all these colors and then a floral and then, a rainbow print, whatever you want, you can actually just come up with your own colors and your own prints, and you can source PFP or prepared for print fabric that is white. And basically what you do is you'll just play with your prints and your colors on your avatar. Then you'll put that avatar up on your website And you can use that to gather orders. And then those orders will be filled as they come in batches. So instead of going the old fashioned route where you go, okay, I'm going to cut and sew each sample in all the colors. I'm going to take it to Magic and I'm going to get pre-orders from all the stores. And then I'm going to go manufacture those and I'm going to tack on a little bit for my own direct to customer sales. And now I need to make 500 of them. And then I'm going to sit on inventory of this floral print because nobody actually wanted it in the real world. And so instead of that happening, we're just print, cutting, and sewing what has been ordered off of the website. So this is what we call batched on demand. And we're able to do that because of another piece of technology, which is this sustainable printer that we have. It's the Kornit Presto. It basically prints on almost any fiber. So it's much different than printing so normally when you print on fabrics, it's through a process called sublimation, and that's using man-made polyester and things like that. And, as you've talked about, that's plastic that is filling up our landfills right now. So this printer can print on sustainable fabrics. We've printed on cactus leather and bamboo and hemp and silk and whatever else anybody's brought here can be printed on, and that allows you to really use better fabrics and then to not waste so much of it because you're only printing what has been ordered. And then the next piece of that technology is when it's time to now, like it's sewn, we can add an NFC chip into the garment. And that garment, when you tap your phone, you don't need any kind of app or anything. You just tap your phone to it, and you can actually upload all the important information about that garment into this chip. And think of it this way. Your care label information can be there. So it can be like how to wash it, what it's made out of, all the required FTC information. You can also have a brand video on there. So you can say, hey, I'm so-and-so, this is my brand, and I'm the owner, and blah, blah, blah. Then you can put your website, your social media handles. There is an area where you can upload things constantly. So if you needed to tell all the consumers who bought your garment that you're having a sale or that you're now going to be at this pop-up trunk show or whatever, you can add to the timeline so they can constantly see the most updated stuff. So you're actually marketing direct to your customer. And then the customer can add to the timeline. So let's say that person bought your cool dress and they went to Paris and they wore it on the streets of Paris. They can film themselves and they can put it onto the timeline. And that means that they have this keepsake, that they have a record of where they wore this thing. You have created a work of art because you've engineered some really cool limited, prints that are special, that are artistic. So now that becomes a keepsake. You've actually installed all kinds of videos of the people who were actually cutting and sewing that garment and the printing, so that you're educating your consumer on why this thing is so special. And that's how you can justify a higher price point, because it's going to be a higher price point, like we talked about, when you're manufacturing in small batches domestically, and most people don't understand why. So if you have this chip, this is your education to your consumer, and it's the value. It's the value that's added to the item, so they get it, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm going to cherish this piece. I now have a record of it forever that I can pass down to somebody else." The ownership is transferable, so if they wanted to give it to their kid or a friend or whatever, now they can keep adding to the timeline, and the brand can keep educating the next person who owns it, because you can keep sending things to that chip, so it constantly populates, and they know, hey, you know what? We just added a whole new collection. We got this dress in another print or whatever. So it is like the coolest part of the end-to-end technology that we have here. And all of that is what we do at Fabric. And this place, we call it a Phygital Fashion Innovation Center, because it's physical and digital. Like, we embrace the digital and try to marry it with the physical, so that we're giving these opportunities to small actually brands of any size, can come and take advantage of this. But we really did this because we wanted to help smaller brands and be able to give them the things that would give them a leg up over those big brands, so that they can charge more, because they literally have to.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's so interesting you talk about like giving small brands a leg up here, because the playing field is not fair at all, and it is really, really hard. Honestly, the brands that exist right now, like small brands, I am so impressed with those that keep going for 2, 3, 5, even 10 years, because it is not fair, and
Yeah.
it's really, really difficult because unfortunately, like the industry works the way it works because it works well for these huge companies.
Yeah.
And it stifles innovation, right? It kind of ensures that they'll almost have like a monopoly on what we can buy.
Well, that's a good point because anybody who comes through here, the first thing that they learn from us is that you have to figure out what your niche is because there's no way you're
Mm-hmm.
competing with the big brands. And so, since you can't make that generic product that they're already making, you got to do something special. So, whether it's a special fit, you're filling a void in the marketplace, or if you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing that, it's got to be special because of the artwork. And that's why this printer allows us to be able to do both. Because let's say you were designing a brand of curvy girl clothing or tall thin guy clothing or whatever it is, your thing is special, so people are going to be willing to spend more on it because they're not going to be able to find it at a big brand because they have to make this generic thing that fits most people, where you're making something that fits a unique person. And that way, they will spend a little bit more, but they still don't fully understand how much more because they don't understand the whole process, which isn't their fault. So being able to educate them in this is really important so that they do get it. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm buying this thing that I know I love it already because it fits me and I couldn't find anything else that fits me. It's got this great work of art, but now I'm reading, exactly why. And so, it's like a full package of everything that I think that we need to embrace as a society so that we don't kill our planet. It's a
Yeah,
great way to do
yeah.
that.
No, I think it's amazing. So, it's interesting because like what you're touching on here is like what a better future for fashion could look like and ultimately it's not even like what it could look like. It's what it needs to be for the sake of our planet and all the people living on it. Like, what's your vision for a future fashion industry that is not, right now the fashion industry is like so depressing to me because all I can think of now when I look at clothes is like, wow, well, that's why I'm having a heat wave in Pennsylvania today. Like I can't explain it. Like it's so wasteful. It actually like really stifles innovation and creativity as it exists right now, as we've been talking about. What do you think a better future fashion industry is going to look like?
Well, I love this question because this dives into our vision. So our mission
Mm-hmm.
is to help individuals, is to help people. We're providing all the resources to the apparel entrepreneurs. Our vision is a planet focused one where we're trying to set the model, the example for what the industry
Mm-hmm.
could be doing in the future by embracing all the technology that I've been talking about to not have to do those giant production runs for everything. So what we envision, and we actually have Eco Fashion Week that you came to every year to kind of educate people about this and to celebrate sustainability and bring everybody together to learn and
Mm-hmm.
have opportunities to showcase what they're doing and things. But one of the things we did this year was that you got to step into was the Eco Park Summit. And we had a summit where we
Yes.
invited in a whole bunch of supply chain people to have a discussion about what the future of the industry could look like. And one of those people is a man named Bill McGrath, and he was the former chief supply chain officer for Walmart and PVH, Victoria's Secret, Calvin Klein, all these different companies that he said he spent his career kind of being guilty of doing all these horrible things we've been talking about. So he feels like he ruined the planet while he was working. And now in his retirement, he's really trying to figure out like, what does it look like for the industry to change? So he came up with this vision of what a model could look like that could really be the answer. And he calls it an eco park. And it's imagine a circular supply chain where domestically you can grow fibers, you can turn those fibers into the yarns, you can actually knit or weave them into the fabrics locally. Those can be PFP white fabrics that can then be printed on, printers like the Kornit, the sustainable printer. They can be used
Mm-hmm.
by domestic or local designers and brands. Then after they make their cool, unique pieces that are filling the void in the marketplace, or even the big brands, they can be using it to test innovative new ideas instead of just investing in giant quantities of things and hoping that they work. They can take their more interesting ideas that they're not 100% sure of, and they can use the same exact model. And then once those pieces are done and the consumer is done with them, they can be reduced back to their fiber state and put back into that circular supply chain. That's the vision. And so in that vision, he's mapped the whole thing out, and he's said, in the middle of that vision needs to be an innovation center where people can test and play and new technologies can happen. And we met him at an industry show, and we've brought him here to Fabric, and he loved this, and he said, "This is what I'm talking about. This is the innovation center." So he's been putting us in the middle of his eco park presentations as the example of the first, innovation center that's actually doing things in line with the whole vision. And so we invited him and basically all of his contacts in the industry to come and have a conversation about, okay, here's this eco park. Is it even possible? And everybody got together and kind of weighed in and did the pluses and the minuses and what would the next steps look like and how much money would be raised to actually take it to the next step, and then how much money would need to be raised to take it to the next step, and then to actually make it happen, and all these things. So the vision that we have is that circular supply chain model, or at least something as close as possible to it, where some things can be reshored and can be done domestically obviously by all the small brands, but also by the big brands, that a big brand can actually partake in this model on items that they really don't know if they're going to hit, and they don't want to end up with all that excess inventory. So why don't they put it through this smaller model where they're putting it out there, they're testing things, and then if it does scale, if it's something that is a hit, they can go near shore instead of going offshore. There's a lot of resources that are just right south of the border. It's so much, easier to be able to go there to see what's happening, to be in those factories and make sure everything's being done correctly. And then if something is a huge hit, then maybe they do have to take some of those things offshore. But there's certain things I don't think we're ever going to get away from when it comes to that, like large volume kind of fast fashion thing. It's pieces like underwear and t-shirts and stuff that are made at a giant scale anyway. So I don't know that we're ever going to change that. But all the other fashion forward and those kind of innovative products and stuff, they can all be done domestically in this type of model. So that's our vision, is to create that, and we're actually doing it. Like, we have this innovation center. It's the foundation for the whole thing. We have all these working tools coming together to actually prove that this is what it would take to do this. We have many test cases because so many of our brands are utilizing this, and we even have a couple of big brands that are like doing playing around with it, trying to figure out if it's going to work for them. So my vision is that in the next few years, we grow into that bigger, we're helping a lot more brands, we're helping a lot more bigger brands, and we're growing a little bit more of the circular supply chain model. So we can add on a few of those components until eventually we have a fully working circular supply chain fashion eco park. And I'd love it to be right here in Arizona. And the reason is because we're here, but also because Arizona has a lot going for it. We're right next to, we've got a border, Mexico's right there. We're right next to LA. We're right next to California. So a lot of the people already in the industry are very close. They can move here. It's a lot more affordable. We have a lot of other industries that are setting up here right now, like the microchips and things like that are like a huge thing that's happening in Arizona. The movie industry has been dabbling over here. So there's a whole bunch going on here. Cost of living is lower. It's an easy life here. Everything is new. The city is really new and beautiful and clean. And, there's just a lot going for it. And we've embraced, in Arizona, we embrace a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of innovation and support for entrepreneurs and things like that. So there's just, I think, a potential that this could be, in my opinion, and it's our vision, that this could be the next, and I dare say it, here I go, the next fashion industry hub for the United States. And that's because LA and New York, as much as I love, and I love LA, I spent so much time there. Again, it's an older way of doing things that are having a hard time adapting to the new way. And it's hard to adapt something that's already established. So why, the fact that we've already done this from the ground up, we're free to do that. We're not strapped down by all of the red tape that a big big businesses. We are starting it from the ground up using all of this technology. So why can't we make a better, industry happen and do it right here in Arizona? So my answer is that's what the future looks like. It's the new fashion industry based in technology right here in Arizona.
I mean, I love that. I totally agree with what you're saying, that like the industry as we know it right now is so stuck. Like there's no, I think that we like often, we're humans, right? So we tend to look for like an easy right, wrong, yes, no, instant fix kind of mentality. That's just like, that's how, I'm sure that's like an evolutionary, like built into our brains tendency so that we can like avoid being eaten by a dinosaur or whatever. Not that humans existed when dinosaurs were around, but I'm just saying. And anyway, I think that we tend to be like, well, why can't the industry just like turn it off and turn it back on and be in this like new mindset and be fully circular? And it's like, it can't. It's too established at this point. Any change for the existing infrastructure of fashion, it would be like baby steps and it would take a really long time. And what we really need is almost like these new innovators to build a new industry.
Yep.
And when I moderated that panel conversation with Bill, I asked him, like, why are these brands so short-sighted? Because, like, the way I look at it is, like, sure, you can sell a lot of cheap clothes fast right now, but, like, 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, when climate change is, like, killing people and making it really hard to have any quality of life, are you still going to be able to sell all those clothes? No. Right. So, like, why can't they see the big future, right? Why can't they make the change now? And even he was like, that's just not how they work. They're looking at like 3 months from now, not
and money
even
talks.
3 years. And money talks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was so interesting to talk to him because he comes in with this different perspective and he has all this experience and he knows as well. He knows why the existing industry is not going to make a change. We just need to build a new one.
Exactly. And you know what? Those that don't change are going to be left in the dust.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he said, I actually like talked about this in the last episode that I released. He talked about how we're looking at an extinction event, not for people, not for animals, for fashion brands, because they are so stuck. They cannot change. They're trying to compete with Shein when really what they should be doing is trying to like move in a more sustainable, less wasteful direction for themselves. And they're not going to survive. It's going to be like all those brands who didn't understand that you need to sell on the internet. Like Delia's went out of business because they were late to get on the internet, right? Like, or like less cool Sears, like, they were like, oh, people aren't going to buy stuff online on the internet. And those places went out of business, right? Like that was an extinction event for brands who were like in denial. And this is where we are again.
They are, and they're saying the same kind of things. They're like, oh, people aren't going to care about sustainability or about ethical, manufacturing. And maybe they didn't like 10 years ago, but a lot more people do. And you know what? This is the opportunity for these small brands to be the new fashion. You know what I mean? Like I have a feeling that the whole industry is going to completely change and it's going to be in the hands of the creatives and the entrepreneurs. It's not going to be in the hands of those big brands anymore because they're going to die out. Like you said, they're not going to keep up. The unfortunate thing is that, it literally would be a better financial situation for them if they did embrace this change because the amount of money that is wasted in all of that excess inventory that they have to manufacture overseas is way more than what it would be to just change a few systems and actually embrace this. They just can't they can't wrap their heads around it because they're really stuck in like their old school way of thinking of things. My business partner, Sherry, calls it new math and they cannot grasp the new math.
It's so true. I mean, I've worked for these brands and it's a multifaceted, like where they're refusing to see the writing on the wall. It is sustainability issues, it's ethical issues, it's even like the quality and fit issues, like the return rates, right? Like they just rather than like saying like, hey, like a third or half of what we're selling is getting returned, maybe we need to reevaluate the product we're selling. They're like, oh, we'll just start charging for returns. Like, we're not going to fix anything else, right? Or even like, extending sizes. Like the amount, I've worked places where I'm like, we need to sell beyond a size large. And they're like, oh, do people that big buy clothes? And I'm like,
oh my God.
People, like, I believe the average American woman is like a size 14 or a 16. Like, get your head out of your butt,
I know, it's crazy.
It's so crazy. Yeah, it's just like stuck. I do think like the brands, the innovators, the designers out there, the small businesses right now who are already doing things right into their model, they are going to be like the heirs to this industry. Because these other big brands, they're dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They're dinosaurs. Exactly. And I see it in their earnings reports. Like they're already suffering. This is the beginning stage of that. And so I actually feel really excited about the prospect of this new thriving fashion industry that maybe isn't only located in 3 locations here in the United States, right? Yes. It's in like every state has a hub.
That is what the Eco Park is. Let's prove it here, and then let's replicate it all over the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that's what needs to happen, because even if things were happening more locally, we would be reducing the carbon footprint of the industry just by not flying stuff all around.
Shipping stuff, yes.
I mean, there are all these different wins for it, and every state has a pretty plentiful waste stream to pull from as well for textiles. And I think also, like, if we're looking at from a purely like pragmatic, like economic kind of perspective, well, that creates jobs.
Yes.
Dignified,
you're creating a whole new industry.
Yeah, like good jobs and like skilled jobs. So I'm very excited by this prospect of this change, and it was really, I got to sit in, on one of the Eco Park sessions, and it was like, I was like, wow, everybody in this meeting is so smart and so passionate about making a change, and everybody just had such good input because everybody in that room was from a different part of the stream of production and waste. Just like to have them all in one room, that never happens.
I know.
It was a miracle.
I know. I was so excited. It was really cool because it wasn't just supply chain people. It was academia. It was government. It was, a little bit of everybody, and everybody got to weigh in from a different perspective. So that's what you need. That's what, when we were putting this meeting together, that was the biggest thing, was this needs to not just be our vision, because you can be blinded, you can be short-sighted when you are so invested in something. It needs to be a whole bunch of people coming together with nothing to gain. Everybody needs to really think about this in an altruistic way so that this really can happen. So anybody who was interested in coming that had, that they only wanted to come if they could gain something, they ended up not getting invited. Like, we specifically didn't accept them into the thing. We were like, you know what, this has to be a whole bunch of people that really just want to fix the planet. And that's who you saw in the room. So it was really exciting to see that.
You know what else was cool about it is that everybody in that room, for the most part, like, their day-to-day lives, day-to-day businesses would have to change if the Eco Park becomes a reality. Like, it's not a simple thing that just benefits them. Like, they know that there will be big changes as part of this, and yet they're like, yeah we have to do this. Like, it's going to be hard, but we have to do it. And when the meeting wrapped up, I left feeling like this is really going to happen.
Yeah, it gave me a lot of hope. I mean, there's baby steps to everything. Then, there needs to be funds that are put towards this, because, who is going to work on this to keep it moving forward, every day of their life, just like any business or whatever. So somebody needs to get paid for that. And so there's we're right now trying to figure out where is all that funding from. And, what's so awesome is so many of the people in that room are all pitching in funding to make sure that first step can actually move forward. So these people are speaking with their wallets, they really want to make this change. And these are things that they know are going to benefit them in the future, years and years and years later. But, they're willing to put in the money right now just because they know that it's vital. And so that's what's so exciting about it.
If If you're enjoying this episode, then this is a great time to remind you that my work here at Clotheshorse is made possible by the support of listeners like you, just like NPR, and these great small businesses. Please go give them your support. Blank Cass, or Blanket Coats by Cass, is focused on restoring, renewing, and reviving the history held within vintage and heirloom textiles. By embodying the love, craft, and energy that is original to each vintage textile as I transfer it into a new garment, I hope we can reteach ourselves to care for and mend what we have and make it last. Blank Cass lives on Instagram at _Cass, and a website will be launched soon at blankcass.com. Located in Whistler, Canada, Velvet Underground is a velvet jungle full of vintage and secondhand clothing, plants, a vegan cafe, and lots of rad products from other small sustainable businesses. Our mission is to create a brand and community dedicated to promoting self-expression, as well as educating and inspiring a more sustainable and conscious lifestyle, both for the people and the planet. Find us on Instagram at shop_velvetunderground or online at www.shopvelvetunderground.com. St. Evens is a New York City-based vintage shop that is dedicated to bringing you those special pieces you'll reach for again and again. More than just a store, St. Evens is dedicated to sharing the stories and history behind the garments. 10% of all sales are donated to a different charitable organization each month. New vintage is released every Thursday at wearstevens.com with previews of new pieces and more, brought to you on Instagram at wear_st.evens. That's where St. Evens. Country Feedback is a mom and pop record shop in Tarboro, North Carolina. They specialize in used rock, country, and soul and offer affordable vintage clothing and housewares. Do you have used records you want to sell? Country Feedback wants to buy them. Find us on Instagram at Country Feedback Vintage and Vinyl, or head down east and visit our brick and mortar. All are welcome at this inclusive and family-friendly record shop in the country. Republica Unicornia Yarns, handmade yarn and notions for the color obsessed, made with love and some swearing in fabulous Atlanta, Georgia by head yarn wench Kathleen. Get ready for rainbows with a side of giving a damn. Republica Unicornia is all about making your own magic using small batch, responsibly sourced, hand-dyed yarns and thoughtfully made notions. Slow fashion all the way down and discover the joy of creating your very own beautiful hand-knit, crocheted, or woven pieces. Find us on Instagram at Republica_Unicornia_yarns and at www.republicaunicornia.com. Picnic Wear, a slow fashion brand ethically made by hand from vintage and dead stock materials, most notably vintage towels. Founder Danny has worked in the industry as a fashion designer for over 10 years, but started Picnic Wear in response to her dissatisfaction with the industry's shortcomings. Picnic Wear recently moved to rural North Carolina, where all their sewing and accessories are now designed and cut, but the majority of their sewing is done by skilled garment workers in New York City. Their customers take comfort in knowing that all their sewists are paid well above New York City minimum wage. Picnic Wear offers minimal waste and maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. Cute Little Ruin is an online shop dedicated to providing quality vintage and secondhand clothing, vinyl, and home items in a wide range of styles and price points. If it's ethical and legal, we try to find a home for it. Vintage style with progressive values. Find us on Instagram at Cute Little Ruin. Is there a little bit of Italy in your soul? Are you an enthusiast of pre-loved decor and accessories? Bring vintage Italian style and history into your space with the Pewter Thimble. We source useful and beautiful things and mend them where needed. We also find gorgeous illustrations and make them print-worthy. Tarot cards, tea towels, and hand-picked treasures available to you from the comfort of your own home. Responsibly sourced from across Rome, lovingly renewed by fairly paid artists and artisans, with something for every budget. Discover more at thepewterthimble.com. decodenim.com. Deco Denim is a startup based out of San Francisco, and it sells clothing and accessories that are sustainable, gender fluid, size inclusive, and high quality, made to last for years to come. Deco Denim is trying to change the way you think about buying clothes. Founder Sarah Mattis wants to empower people to ask important questions like, where was this made? Was this garment made ethically? Is this fabric made of plastic? Can this garment be upcycled? And if not, can it be recycled? Sign up at decodenim.com to receive $20 off your first purchase. They promise not to spam you and send out no more than 3 emails a month, with 2 of them surrounding education or a personal note from the founder. Again, that's decodenim.com. Well, and the other thing I want to say, speaking of like putting in the work, like when the first time you and I spoke and you were kind of telling me the story of fabric, you know, I want to be clear to everybody who's listening that like fabric didn't just like fall into your lap and it was really easy and like you had all the money and it was like no big deal. They just gave you the keys and you were like, wow, thanks for this amazing building. Because you were telling me stories of like making financial sacrifice, of literally, and they're like battling spider webs and like making the original building like habitable. And like you were, I don't know, I imagined you were in there with a sledgehammer knocking down walls. I mean, you and Sherry, like you put in the work. It wasn't like, oh, now we have a nonprofit organization. Like it was hard.
Yeah, that's kind of putting it mildly. I appreciate that you're giving me this opportunity to share that because it was really hard, and I like telling the story because it's a little bit cathartic.
I bet.
I feel like I'm still scarred to this day because we still haven't figured it out, and we still haven't we're still battling those cobwebs. They're just in different forms all the time. So, so basically what happened was, you heard the story about why, and then I was like, okay, what needs to happen is we need to create this place, but I don't have any money because I'm at that point a starving artist and teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I need to figure out how to fund this. And I put the idea out there. And then Sherry was one of the people I had been consulting. So she had started her own brand. And she went through the whole, understanding everything. She went to try to manufacture in Los Angeles, and her marker file accidentally got converted from inches to centimeters when it got sent. Yeah. When it got sent from the grading and marking company to the cutting service. And because she was here in Arizona, she couldn't be there, like I've been saying, to look at it because she would have caught that. And then then it wouldn't have been cut that way. But because she wasn't there, the cutting service cut everything. And then it got moved over to the sewing factory, and the sewing factory sewed everything because it's not their job to check that you gave them the right thing. You know what I mean? That's your job.
Right.
And so basically she ended up getting $30,000 worth of merchandise sewn in miniature versions, and she ended up going out of business. And so she was like, okay, I need to fix this too, and wanted to help me create this place. And the ironic thing is, like, she's really, really, really smart. She writes all of our contracts, so she should have been an attorney. She used to run, she really should have. Her brain is crazy. And she used to run 300 retail stores. So she has a lot of retail experience. She also was the marketing director for the Arizona Science Center, and she has her MBA.
Oh, wow.
And her real estate license. Like, this woman is
Go
crazy.
Get her.
I know. So she's very smart. And so I was like, wow, if you can't do it, who can?
Seriously.
And basically I know. So she made the perfect partner. And so the two of us got together and we said, okay, we're going to need a place big enough to actually be able to manufacture and do all the other stuff that helps designers. So we want, them to have offices to work out of, and we want a maker space, and we want to be able to do photography and, whatever they need. But we also need an event space because there's no way that we're going to make any money having a no minimum manufacturing facility. There's a reason that doesn't exist. Nobody wants to sew small batches because there's no way you can ever make that financially work. And it's already hard to, just lower your minimums to 300. So basically we were like, we're going to create something that's going to lose money. And then we also want to educate people. And most people have no idea that they need to be educated. Like, they don't know when they're starting a clothing brand and they have a good idea for a sewn product that there's such thing as a production manager, and they're going to have to become one, you know? And so we're going to have to give that away or else how are we going to convince people that they need to pay for this because they don't even know they need it? it. So those two things were going to be losing us money. How do we make money? And we came up with the idea that our space needs to be big enough where we can actually rent it out for events. So we need an event space. And we looked around and we couldn't find really anything that worked. And we approached the city of Tempe, Arizona, and they happened to have their former performing arts theater was available because they had built a new one, and this one was sitting abandoned for like 5 years. It hadn't been updated since the 80s, so it was very old school, and there was mauve and teal everywhere, which is nice now, but back then it was like, and there was asbestos in the tile, there was cobwebs and cockroaches, there was theater props and staging and curtains and all this stuff everywhere, and nobody could figure out what to do with this building. Nobody wanted to invest in this building, and they really wanted to give it life again. So we came around just at the right time, and we proposed this idea that if we built this incubator inside this building, then please, to the city of Tempe, please don't charge us a rent, because this building has a lot that needs to be done to it, and we're willing to invest in fixing it up. So Sherry was willing to cash in her own 401k to fix up a city of Tempe building.
Wow.
So that we could make this happen. And then we knew we couldn't afford a rent in a place this big. So we worked out a use agreement with the city where we actually give free and discounted programs and services. So basically, we give away the education, we give away the opportunity for no minimum manufacturing, and we give away all kinds of other free stuff. Like on our website under community, you can find all this amazing free stuff. And we document and we report that to city council. And that's how we pay our rent. That's like in lieu of rent. We also have to pay for utilities and maintenance and all that stuff, but at least it doesn't, require a rent.
Right.
So that was the agreement. We opened in 2016. And because I had spent 15 years building an industry and a community here in Arizona, we had a whole bunch of people ready to roll up their sleeves and help contribute to fixing up the building. So it didn't have to be like all Sherry's money. So we basically had this whole community come in and paint and do flooring. And like you said, wield a sledgehammer and things like that. And we converted the space. And then we opened up in 2016 and we bought all the equipment. Sherry bought all the equipment and we hit the ground running. And since that day, we have actually helped 1,650 apparel entrepreneurs, and we've donated $12.5 million in free and discounted programs and services, which we've documented and reported to City Council to earn our stay in the building. And so a lot of people have gained a lot of free stuff by coming through here. We're super proud of it. It's helped a lot of people. It's a big funnel that says yes to everyone. So not everyone becomes a successful brand. You have to have a good formula. You have to have,
right.
What it takes. You have to be willing to use our resources, willing to read and go through the roadmap. You have to have some money. You have to fill a void in the marketplace. But if you have all that, you come out the bottom of the funnel with a great business. And those businesses are now thriving and people are paying, making a living doing something that they love. So we're really proud about it. And, the obstacles that keep happening to us are just these things that, life just happens. And we just kind of figure out how to pivot around those obstacles in different ways all the time. So as an example, we got the whole thing going. We were like a well-oiled machine, except for the fact that, first of all, to deliver this much it's $600,000 a year in free and discounted programs and services that we have to deliver to earn our stay. It costs us more in staff to deliver that much in free services. So it probably would have been cheaper if we just would have paid a rent somewhere. But we love our arrangement with the city because it's given us a lot of opportunity and exposure. The other thing is, when the pandemic happened in 2020, we could no longer rent our event space out. That was how we were paying our bills, was renting out the event space. It allows us to do all the stuff the good that we do. And when you can't rent an event space in a pandemic, there goes all your income. And so we ended up figuring out what to do. So in the meantime, we had all these people calling us because they couldn't get their hands on any medical gowns, like the surgeons in the hospitals. They could get it was during the mask crisis too, but we knew that what surgeons needed and doctors needed was N95s, and no, the community is not sewing N95s. They're sewing a bunch of, cloth masks, and let them do that. But we can't make N95s. That's not a sewn product. But what we can make is medical gowns. And so we ended up getting FDA certification. We ended up locating the medical grade material, which was really hard because nobody could import anything at the time. We actually had to get our governor to help us fly in with the aid of the National Guard,
Wow.
our materials, because our original batch got seized by the Canadian government because they wanted it. We ended up raising enough money to invest in buying 100 sewing machines and hiring 100 people. And we made 800,000 reusable medical gowns during the pandemic. So we basically gave them all away to the Navajo Nation. We sold them at cost to all the healthcare facilities, and we protected a lot of people. Each one could be washed 100 times. So it kept 80 million disposable gowns from going in the landfill. We thought we came up with the solution to be like sustainable, that the whole industry was now going to suddenly embrace this and be like, oh my God, we can make these, instead of these disposable ones overseas, because they actually cost less, because if you consider how many times you wear them, even with the wash, it costs less than a disposable one does overseas. But the world opens up. Everybody starts buying the ones from overseas again because they're short-sighted and they don't understand the math. It's the new math they don't get. So basically, we were left holding the bag for we had all these employees. We had opened a new facility so that we could continue to do this in a more OSHA way instead of in a theater. We had a 2-year lease on this space. We ended up having 100 employees and all these, machines and 25,000 yards of fabric because we had to buy so much. And, that was the only way to buy it during the pandemic. And all the orders it was like shutting off a faucet. So we ended up with another problem. We were like, okay, we just stepped up. We feel good about what we did. We even got a visit from President Biden and Vice President Harris. They came to our building and they recognized our efforts. So we thought we were on the right track. And then it all happened that way. And we were like, what do we do? So at the same time, the city said, we're going to move you because we want to turn your building into affordable housing, which is awesome. We love affordable housing, but where are we going to move to? So they ended up moving us into this beautiful building. And I love this building. It's gorgeous, but it did not have a manufacturing permit. So we ended up closing the PPE factory, moving all the equipment into this new building. We literally had to take the front of the building off to move the printer in because it's so big. And then we started to try to change over all of the permitting. A year and a half later, we still didn't have a permit because it's like $50,000. And also because there were just all these things that happened along the way. And so we were basically unable to earn our revenue the way that we had prior to the pandemic. And still we were offering all the scholarships into our roadmap. We offer 290 of them every year to disadvantaged entrepreneurs. And still we were offering no minimum manufacturing to everybody, which loses us money so that we could continue to help people because we had all these people relying on us. Yet we had no income. And so this killed us. And we both have now become volunteers.
Wow.
So I work 16 hours a day, literally 16 hours a day.
I've seen it in action.
I'm in the building.
True story. Yeah.
I'm in the building 12 hours a day, and then I go home and I continue to work until midnight. And then I'm a volunteer. I'm not even getting paid to do this. Sherry has never gotten paid to do this. She's been a volunteer since 2016. And so we're just trying to keep this place going because it is literally the solution for the entire planet that we have invested our entire lives into, and we are gonna make it work. No matter what, we are going to figure it out. And so even though these obstacles are in our way, we're sitting on so much potential to do so much good and have been doing so much good. So I feel like we are one little tiny, step away from being self-sustainable by having maybe some big brand like come and sponsor, or to utilize the facility and do a factory takeover, or some big donor who gets it come in and actually donate to it, or for us to get a big grant or something to keep supporting this. But all of that takes a lot of work, and it's really hard to do all of that when what you're doing every day is help thousands of apparel entrepreneurs. So, that's the whole problem, is like, we need the help to continue to do this if we want this to be the answer to the future of fashion. But we can't, two women, no matter how strong we are, and no matter how many hurdles we can jump over, we can't solve the world's problems alone. We actually need people to step up, and instead of greenwashing and saying that they're doing something sustainable, they literally have to kick down a couple $100,000 to a fashion incubator that is actually doing it. And they could put their name on something without having to do anything, and they would literally be doing something instead of greenwashing. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And those hurdles have made us, I think, better for it. But at the same time, oh my gosh, I've listened to you and your podcast, and I've listened to you. You're so inspiring, and I've heard the hurdles you've gone through, and I feel like, I'm just complaining, but you're able to continue to do it. And every day you say things like, oh my God, I want to give up all the time. And I get that more than anybody. Like, I sit here and I cry sometimes by myself in my office because this is hard. I'm exhausted. I don't eat. I don't sleep. I don't see my family. And I just understand every day. I'm like, what the hell? I just want to give up. Why am I doing this? But it's continuing to do that is the only thing that is actually ever going to make a difference in this, because this industry is so backwards and so messed up. It's not going to fix itself. So it's going to take you doing what you're doing and spreading the word, us doing what we're doing and providing these resources, and everybody else that are all your listeners doing what they're doing and supporting the people who are ethically and sustainably making their clothing. So we have to keep going, Amanda.
We do. And it is hard. Like, there is crying for sure. I think, on your end, you're working like a gazillion hours for free, and you probably, I've been there, and I've seen how many things you have to do every day. Like, the pace at Fabric is wild, everyone, and you have sacrificed so much because you believe in this. And I think for all of us who are out there speaking out about it, it's hard because for some reason people are mad at you for speaking out about it. I think most of the time when I end up crying over Clotheshorse, it's because people were being really mean on the internet, and I'm really tired. And I've been for me, I work at my job that pays my bills all day, and then I kind of work on Clotheshorse all night, and it's every day, right? And so I am maybe if I only had to do one, I wouldn't cry because people are mean on the internet. I bet I still would. I'm pretty sensitive. But it's I do feel that and if anybody's listening to this and they feel the same way, listen, this is hard, okay? And things outside of our control, the whole system as it exists, are the reasons that it's hard, right? And that's what we're trying to dismantle. And whether it's you're a small brand and you just want to make product, awesome clothes for people to wear that are going to last forever, and you want to make a living off of that, or if you're someone like Angela, who's just I am trying to rebuild this new industry, be a pioneer in that space, or you're someone who's out there just trying to talk to other people about this stuff. It is hard, right? And it's not going to get easy for a while, unfortunately. And I think for me, where I find the I don't know, the strength and the energy to get through the really hard days is just knowing that there's so many other awesome people out there who care about the same thing, and I think that there's nothing wrong with us ever admitting that it's hard. We have to say that, right?
I agree.
People message me all the time, Angela, who are I want to leave the fashion industry and work or start my own sustainable brand or work for a sustainable brand. Can you help me get a job? And I'm no, actually, because there are just no jobs, right? Because it's really hard. No one can afford to hire someone to pay, basically, right? Or the people, who are I want to start a podcast about slow fashion and quit my job. And I'm no, you're not doing that either. This is hard, right? And there's no easy, I wish we could just hit the fast forward button and we would be there now, but we're not. But we're not going to get there if we give up. And I think just knowing that everybody else is also so excited for us to get there, that's what keeps me going.
Oh my gosh, you said it. That's what keeps me going too, because I'm as sensitive as you are, and people are mad at me too.
It's so weird. Why are they mad at us?
I don't know. I cannot. I still to this day I have a really hard time with it. I just feel like what we said in the beginning. Humans are the way they are for a reason, and they just need a way to feel authority over something. But you're just doing something good. I'm just trying to do something good. I'm just trying to help people and provide them with something. Yet how you end up mad at me, and it's no matter how many times I say it in all of my roadmap and everything. This is hard. You need to do this, or this is going to go wrong. You need to be responsible for this, or this is going to go wrong. Something will go wrong. I keep saying that. These things will go wrong. Things will go wrong. You have to be able to have the financial standing to be able to withstand those things when they go wrong. And you should not be mad at your factory because it's probably because you didn't give them what they needed to be successful. That's usually the case. And if you're in there doing your quality control, you can actually check that something, before it gets too late. If you're not in there, then it's not on them. And those are the little things that make people mad at us. Like if something, they didn't follow what we told them and something went wrong, it's our fault and they're mad at us. Or even people who even aren't even using these resources sometimes are mad. Like they're just like crafters or, not just, I don't mean like that. I'm saying they're not somebody who's manufacturing. They're like somebody who's sewing at home and they don't need manufacturing, and they're just maybe or just a community member or whatever, and they just aren't understanding what we're doing. And so maybe they just feel, I just think, everybody has their own thing, and maybe they just feel a little bit like wishful, like, oh, I wish I could have done that, or I wish I could, or whatever. And then they feel maybe insecure about it. And so then they just don't like you for that reason. I honestly don't know. Like, I really wish I knew, because I'm the same way where I'm like, why is somebody mad at me? I feel like I'm just always trying to be as nice as I possibly can to everyone. And yet I have this person mad at me and I never get it. And those are the things that are really hard. Somebody once asked me, why don't you go on Project Runway? Oh my God, that question drives me crazy. And I'm always like, because I would be the one crying the entire time. I don't need to be sitting there on the
also,
TV crying.
I feel like those are not helpful suggestions.
No.
I get weird suggestions like that too all the time. And I'm like, that's just like not how the world works.
Yeah.
That's not going to do what I'm intending to do right now,
No,
so
it's not.
Yeah. And I think that like, it's true. This is just hard work. And for anyone who's listening, who, if you're like, I'm just tired of like trying to talk to people about Shein and they ignore me, or like I always get messages like that. Like I tried to talk to a bunch of my coworkers about Temu and they just like stared at me blankly and then walked away, and I'm pretty sure bought something on Temu, and I'm like, I feel you. It's okay. I promise you made an impact with that conversation. Like even if it feels like at the time, like I can't believe they went and ordered something on Temu.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
So like I just don't give up. It's going to be okay. We're going to get there because we're all doing it together. And there is just this like amazing power in numbers. I felt for years before I started Clotheshorse and started meeting these people all around the world that I would have never met otherwise. I felt like I was the only person who was worrying about this stuff, who cared. And because I worked in the fashion industry, right? And it's not like you can talk about that at work. And anytime I would sort of skirt the issue at work, people would like look at me like I had three heads. Like, just what? You think we shouldn't cancel all the orders on our vendors because it's the beginning of the pandemic? People just looked at me like I was a monster. And starting Clotheshorse and meeting all of these people who also felt, in many cases, like that they were sort of an island of concern about this stuff too, it made me realize like there are so many of us and we all have the same mission in mind. And all of us, we love clothes. Like we love getting dressed. We're not saying that we want us to all start wearing like clothes made out of paper bags or something, or only have one outfit that you have to wear for the rest of your life. Although if that's what you want to do, that's great too. But like we're saying, like we recognize that getting dressed and making clothing, it's an art form, and we want to bring it back to that. And we don't want it to be destructive anymore. We want it to be good and positive, right? So I think it. Right. And like, we're doing this because we love this so much. We want to protect it. We want to make it better. Exactly. It is sad. I mean, I, much like you, like growing up, like I was making outfits for myself out of things and getting dressed every day. Like it was such an important part of who I was and just this like creative expression for me. I mean, and it still is, to think about how powerful that has been for me. And I'm sure for you too. to think about now how gross the production of clothing is, it's devastating.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
is.
it makes
Yeah.
it makes you feel like you picked the wrong thing to get excited about. You know?
Yeah, that's a funny way to put it. It's true. Like you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if I knew what I knew back then, would I have ever gotten into this industry?
Yeah, I don't know. Would you have? I think you were destined for it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, I think it's a good thing. Like ignorance is bliss, because I think I think that's
True
why.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it happens for a reason. Because yeah, I probably wouldn't have if I knew how hard it was or like how uphill battle it was. Maybe I wouldn't have, but I can't imagine doing anything else. I think that's the key to something like this is the entrepreneurs that are out there that are trying to start their own businesses, and the people who want to start podcasts and all that the stuff that both of us would be like, oh my god, maybe you shouldn't. Their ignorance is bliss, and they're going to end up getting it's not going to work, and the universe is going to make it that way, or the universe is going to make it so it does work for them, and they were meant to be in that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it whatever happens, and it's all meant to be the way that it is. But I can't even ever imagine doing anything else. Like I enjoy it, and so somebody who does make it work is because they enjoy it. So if you can build a life doing something that you would do whether you got paid or not, like the thing that you love is like the ideal. Like that's the ideal career. So instead of sitting behind a desk and being an accountant or something like that, that would not be my jam. Obviously, from my 1.9 GPA and no math, I would never have been able to really live a life that way successfully anyway. So even if I'm stressed out and not sleeping and currently working for free, which sucks, but I mean, it is what it is. All of this stuff, I even if I found another job right now, I would still be doing everything I can to consult and help people understand how to go through this production process, because that is what I enjoy doing. Like, so that's what it takes. If somebody's going to be successful at something, it's because they're passionate about it.
This is so true. Yeah, yeah. And so even though I know I said a few minutes ago that you shouldn't quit your job and start a podcast, I still think you shouldn't quit your job, but you can start a podcast.
Yes. Okay. You know what? That's important, because everybody that comes through these doors, I'm like, make sure that you don't quit your job. This is going to take a long time. So
it's going to take a long time. Yeah. And that is, where I think that comes from. I mean, honestly, like my whole career in fashion, my friends would be like, you should quit your job and start your own business. And I'm like, with what money? Like that's not in the cards for me. I don't have generational wealth like to draw from.
Yeah.
But also, like, I think in 2020, when all of us lost our jobs and people started businesses and now they're still doing it, people think that you can totally just quit your job and start a business and it'll be fine. And for my smallest clients, I'm always like, you cannot quit your job yet. And it sucks and it's going to be hard.
Yeah. That's why it takes that A-type personality that's going to work like overtime, because you still have to keep a 9 to 5, and then you have to do this passion project in the evening on the weekends. And so are you into that? Can you do that? That's the first question you have to ask yourself when you're becoming an entrepreneur of any kind. Like if you don't have some big investor or something like that, then that's actually how you have to do it.
Yeah, it takes time and it's hard, and you need to drink a lot of water and take B vitamins every day and try to remember to eat, because the ramp up is hard. And in fashion, it's like extra hard because it's kind of like the world doesn't want it to be easy for you.
I know. That's what I said. It's like a harder industry to make money off of. And even when I started my own brand, Monkey Wench, and I had an investor, the actress, I kept my job at the X Large company, and I did Monkey Wench on the evening and the weekends. That was the only way we could afford to do it, even with an actress's income to support it.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, it's very, very normal. So we probably have talked everybody out of making their own line now. But if you're still interested, or you already have a small brand, I do really, like my friend Janelle, who her brand is All Roads, and she doesn't really make clothing anymore, but her background was in fashion design. She came to Eco Fashion Week with me while I was there, and she was just like blown away by what fabric does. And she was like, wow, this would help so many people that we know. So I urge all of you who are designers to connect with fabric, because I think that you will be amazed by what you can do with the help of fabric. If I were going to start making clothing right now, like that's where I would start.
Yay.
So, yay.
Yes, please come to Fabric. That's what we're here for. And we started in Arizona, but we're now helping people from all over the country and all over the world, because now we have video chat. And so unlike before where I couldn't do that from LA, we can do it from anywhere because you can still quality control your stuff via video. We can talk this way. We can do all kinds of things. So basically being able to help people from all over, the world is really what we're doing now. So anybody can come here. You don't have to have any prior experience. You can get free resources just by becoming a free member. And then if you want to work with us to develop a product or manufacture it, then you can become an apparel entrepreneur member. There is a fee for the apparel entrepreneur member. We ask that you pay it 1 month, and then you apply for a scholarship. And like I said, we scholarship minorities, veterans, people with disabilities, and people with a significant financial need, and women. So if you meet any of those requirements, then you wouldn't have to continue to pay that full price. You might get a full scholarship and pay nothing, or a fraction of the regular monthly membership. Plus, for that first month, you get to meet with me twice. We get to sit down for 2 hours and discuss your products. You're basically paying for my consultation time for, the one-time fee. And then you can download the whole entire roadmap if you want to and walk away. It's all month to month. And it's because we're nonprofit. We just really want to help people. So the first month is just get a little skin in the game so people actually use the resources.
That's awesome. That's such a good idea. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but sometimes when things are completely free, people just don't engage in them. It's really weird.
Yeah.
And I say that as a bar. I bet. Yeah. I'm always like, what the heck? Well, thank you so much, Angela. This was so much fun.
Oh my gosh. Amanda, thank you. I told you, this is like my dream come true. I've been listening for so long and I've learned so much from you. I mean, I've learned so much. You're incredible, and all the stuff that you share is just so valuable to all of your listeners. So I just want to thank you so much for doing what you do, and then for allowing me this platform to share what we do. I feel like, I don't know, I just got to sit on Oprah Winfrey's couch or something like that.
Wow. It was I just want to say thank you so much to you and your whole team for having me out in April. It was so amazing. It was so revitalizing for me. And I just loved everybody I met and your team. And it was so exciting to be in different rooms with people who are just so passionate about this. And that's the energy. That's what I need. That keeps me going. So I can see why you're so passionate about fabric, because you get to be surrounded with people like that every day.
Yeah, that does keep you going. Somehow we need to get you back over here. So we'll work on that.
I know. Thanks to Angela for spending a few hours with me. I hope that I get a chance to return to Tempe again so I can hang out with her team, because everyone at Fabric is amazing. I want to give a shout out to Amelia for picking me up at the airport in her beautiful vintage car, Leslie for making sure I was well cared for while I was there and bonding with me over single motherhood, and Angela and Sherry for creating an organization and a team that fills me with so much hope for a better future. And I will share all the links and whatnot to find Fabric in the show notes of this episode, because for any of you who have your own brand, who want to start your own brand, all of you designers out there, I urge you to go check out what Angela and Sherry and their team are doing at Fabric, because I think it could be really helpful for you. And also, one thing I really love about Fabric is it's not just an idea that someone's hoping to make happen. It's really happening right now. It's real. The last thing I'll say to finish out this episode, because it is 96 degrees outside and I need to turn that air conditioner back on seriously. My face is sweating right now. I think my eyes are sweating right now. There are many reasons why I wanted to feature Angela on an episode of Clotheshorse. And by now, you've probably realized most of them while listening to our conversation. But there's one that you might not have picked up on, and that's this. For so long, sustainable fashion and even a lot of the activism around it has been led by people with a lot of, let's just say it, financial privilege. And let's be honest, the biggest names and even some of the organizations within the sustainability realm, they feel super white and financially comfortable, young, thin, cisgendered. And when I started Clotheshorse, I was acutely and painfully aware of that. It felt just like working within the normal fashion industry. There were a lot of days when I felt that someone like me, a non-binary person in my 40s with a low-income background and cancer scars all over my body. Like, how could a person like that be a part of this? I felt like no one would want to listen to me because I wasn't pretty, rich, and young. And certainly that made me feel like an outsider during my career. I don't think I could have continued to work on Clotheshorse if I had found that the world outside of fashion, this community that was working against fast fashion, was the same as being inside fashion. Fortunately, over the years, I have found so many of you who have felt left out of the sustainable fashion community because you didn't fit into those boxes either. That's one of the reasons I use the term slow fashion rather than sustainable fashion, because slow fashion, it's for everyone, everybody, all of us. One thing that has struck me time and time again over the last few years and was particularly driven home by my visit to Fabric is that we are the ones doing the hard work of changing the status quo. We're the ones talking to our friends and family. We're the ones starting small ethical business and joining together, like Angela and Sherry did, to build the world we want. And many of us are doing it the hard way, just like Angela and Sherry, because we don't have the generational wealth to fund our businesses or pay our bills. Many of us are operating with no safety net as we try to change this world. We personally have so much to lose. It's really scary sometimes. I'm sure you feel that. And yet we also know that the world will lose even more if fast fashion continues as it currently is. So I want you to know that I see your hard work. I see that you get so tired and frustrated that sometimes you just have to cry. I see those days when you just wish you didn't know what you know now and you could just cover your ears and stop caring because it would be easier than knowing and wanting to change things. These are all feelings that I have had so many times, and I'm sure I will continue to have in the future. But guess what? The work we're all doing, it matters. You matter. Even if you feel like your contribution is tiny. It's like I always say, one person can't change the world alone. But when we're working together, supporting one another, encouraging one another, well, we will change the world. And actually, we already are. Look around you. It's really happening. Thanks for listening to another episode of Clotheshorse. Written, researched, edited, hosted, all the things by me, Amanda Lee McCarty. I always say, if you like it, leave a rating, a review, tell your friends, especially tell your friends. You can subscribe. You can do all of those things to support Clotheshorse, and I will be very grateful for it. If you'd like to support my work financially, seriously, I had this moment today where I was thinking if by next summer I could have enough supporters on Patreon or somewhere, advertisers, whatever it is, I could get a keyholder membership at the Candy Factory, and then I could record all my episodes in their climate-controlled podcast studio rather than sweating my butt off. Literally, my butt is so sweaty right now in my office during the summer. So that's a goal for me. Anyway, if you want to make that dream happen for me next year, there are many ways you can support my work financially. You can find all that in the show notes. That includes Patreon. If you want to just do a one-time thing, which I totally get because subscription is such a big commitment. I can barely handle a streaming service just knowing that I'm paying for it every month. You can also make a one-time donation via Ko-fi. Like I said, that's in the show notes or at my website or in my bio on Instagram. You can find it all over the place. The last thing I'll just say for this week, it's the same thing I say every week, which is thank you so much, as always, to Mr. Justin Travis White for our music and audio support. And I'm pretty sure, I looked at the weather. I think I'll see you all next week unless the weather changes and it's too hot to record here. All right, bye.